This is Ryan McGowan, and you're listening to Monday Night Football.
Hello, and welcome to another week's Monday Night Football as I try and sort out this creaky microphone. We're all back, it's a full house, because we've got a derby to talk about, haven't we, boys?
Yes.
You're not allowed to speak like this isn't a classroom, like I know it's the intro, but...
Yes, we do, Sam.
We do indeed. So, I'm not going to muck around for too long. I want it to be a relatively tight show. I know that we could go on for days about this derby, and because of that I'm going to try and hold this to 11 o'clock for the first time I think in Monday Night Football history.
Controversial.
I'm going to try and keep us to 11, so I think we should probably just start talking about it. Now, before we go on, we will look at it from either side's perspective. As always, the joy and the agony of talking about it on a Monday night is that a lot of it has already been done to death. Now, that's good for us because it gives us the option to steer clear of certain topics. But one thing that I just wanted to get a quick consensus from everyone in the room regarding is whether 1-1 was a fair result or not. And I want to see whether the supporter bias plays any part in that for obvious reasons. So if we can just go around the room and see first and foremost, before we go in the individual clubs, Scott, as a Jambo, was 1-1 a fair result for you?
No, I think there was one team that were more positive throughout the whole match, more than the other. I think Hibs probably deserved to, I wouldn't even say sneak a win, I think Hibs probably deserved to win that match.
Okay. Mikey, the Hibby, do you agree?
I do, yeah. I think that we were, I'm going to say comfortably because that's not necessarily the right phrase, but I think we were over the whole 90 minutes the better side. I think we're significantly better in the first half. I think it was marginally, for most of the second half, I think Hearts were marginally better. Our last 10 minutes was a bit of a free-for-all. But other than that, I think we were the better side. We'd certainly seen more intent on trying to win the game. But a bit more of a sort of distinct pattern of play and sort of phases of play. I think we just seemed to be more threatening looking, and as we've said a lot of times in the past weeks, it's just that lack of ruthlessness in front of goal that I think cost us, especially the Cummins opportunity right after he'd scored.
Okay, well we'll analyse it in a lot greater detail as we go on, but just to stay on this theme, Sean, another Jambo, what was your opinion? Was it a fair result?
I thought at the time, at the game, Hearts got slightly fortunate coming away with a point, but when you go away and actually look at the stats didn't really lie. So on reflection at the game, you think, Hearts maybe got a bit lucky, but looking at the stats, Hearts had more shots, although they weren't on target. They edged it on possession, fouls were about the same. It seems a lot more even than I remember it. So
you're not sure how much your tinted spectacles maybe made you err on the side of caution. You were more concerned at the game than you maybe should have been, you think, on reflection?
That, along with me probably having the worst view in the stadium.
Okay. Right, well, let's move on before we get into too much detail. Ross, you're the final one for this question.
Begrudgingly, I think a 1-0 was a fair result. I mean, we obviously go through the game. The Hibs had the better first half. I mean, they ran us ragged, like their life depended on it. And unfortunately, you can't play a full 90 minutes like that. And that showed in the second half, which we dominated the possession, which kind of took us over the 50% mark as we're chatting about there. Yeah. So I think overall, 1-0's probably the best result I think both teams could have hoped for. Cummins' header was a terrible header, so I discount that totally. I think, but apart from that, no, 1-0's fine.
Okay, let's analyse the game in detail then. I do think this is going to be interesting because we've all had a wee conversation about it on Facebook. Some of us straight away, Scott and I were talking just before the show started about one of the great things about this time slot is that you've had 2 days to kind of come to terms with it, and our views are potentially more valid now than they were at 3 o'clock. Because at 3 o'clock it was purely heat of the moment, and
it's always going to be like that.
But now the views are slightly more valid because we've had a chance to maybe watch certain incidents back or stew on what we thought about it, and we still feel that way, or we've changed our mind and now feel a different way about it. I think that Ross and Mikey will find are potentially more bullish here than the others if Saturday's reaction is anything to go by, because you've butted heads a wee bit on, oh well, Stubbs is talking rubbish, well Nielsen's talking rubbish then. So that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But if it's alright with you, Mikey, I want to focus on Hearts first and then lead on to Hibs. But there's a reason for doing it, and it's really because of the reaction amongst the Hearts fans to the result. Now, I've got a couple of questions to start off with, because I think more so than the team, a lot of the analysis from this game has to focus on Robbie Nielsen. Now, as Hearts supporters, are you all agreed that Robbie Nielsen set out not to lose the game?
I'm not sure. I think he was trying out a few new things again, and he has been doing that now. He's been experimenting, not so much in the team lineup, but with setting out new style of play over the last sort of month or so. It was evident at Cowdenbeath and even certain stages against Livingston. You could see it again against Hibs. I felt like we were trying to let Hibs play like the home side. It wasn't so much that we were going out there to play for a draw, but I think we were trying to hit them on the counter-attack, probably due to the fact that we've only got one option up front just now, and we're probably trying to coax Hibs up the park a bit and get Keaton's playing in behind the two centre-halves, which is where he's most effective. Now, it didn't work. That was very evident, especially in the first half. And obviously that's something that he can try and work on for the next derby. But I wouldn't say he went out there looking for a draw. Some people, were comparing him to Mourinho and how sometimes he goes looking for draws in big games. I don't think that was the case at all.
Sean and Ross, let's work on the assumption that there was, at least if he didn't play for a draw, there was an acceptance that a draw was an acceptable result. If that's the case, despite a general feeling amongst the support that the performance could have been a lot better, can Saturday actually be seen as a tactical triumph for Robbie Nielsen?
Absolutely. I mean, it's another game unbeaten. All we need to do is stay unbeaten and beat the teams, or draw with the teams that are round about us. There's a 13-point gap. We don't need to worry about trying going out and cuffing teams like 4-0. We need to consolidate our position, just like any other team that's in our position. We need to move along with the times now. We can't go out and play like the team at the top of the league every week. It's just not possible to do that. We need to start worrying about keeping players fit. We need to start worrying about keeping players, happy and rotating the squad and making sure everyone's getting their piece of the pie, so to speak. And Robbie Nielsen, after the 1-0, I think you've seen it in his face. He didn't seem too concerned. Maybe that's him hiding his feelings when someone's come, put a microphone in front of his face and ask him what's happened in the game. But he seems a very kind of content, happy individual right now, and nothing seems to faze him, even when his team aren't playing that well.
Sean, tactical triumph for Robbie, or did he get off a wee bit lucky?
I think it's kind of in between the two, to be honest. I think we spoke about it a good wee while ago now, quite a few times, that had Hearts already been through the problem patch, I think this is it coming now. I think you're seeing it with the strikers not being there and everything that's going on. There's quite a few players not having good performances at the moment. I said about Ozturk last week that we needed him to show up. This week I didn't think we got the performance that we needed. I think that was evident in the first couple of minutes when he played that pass.
12 seconds.
Yeah. Really? Was it 12 seconds?
Something like that.
It seemed longer than that.
It was played back to him pretty much from centre, I think.
And then once again, Gomes and Bouabin for me weren't up to it. That's why Scott Allen bossed it in the middle, or certainly got his opportunities to shine the way that he has, or everyone says he has, in the start of the season. So I think coming out that game with a 1-1 was good. When you saw it at the Livingston game as well. Hearts really aren't firing on all cylinders. We're still maintaining the unbeaten streak. So,
okay, we'll get back into Nielsen's mentality, because I think there is a lot to be spoken about there, and it is interesting to see because we're going to talk later in the show about what comes next for both teams, and one of the big things that will impact that is how the managers approach the next few games mentally and how their tactics are affected by exactly where they find themselves at the moment. Let's talk specifically about tactics for the weekend. Now, Robbie went with a 3 in midfield that we had advocated last week, that we felt was nailed on, but I think we all expected it to be either in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 without getting too football managery about it. But what we actually did was play a 4-3-2-1 formation. I've seen some people refer to it as a Christmas tree, but in actual fact it's more like a giant pyramid when you actually lay it out, because the two that you would expect to provide the width were actually as narrow as we've ever seen them, I think, Nicholson and Walker. How surprised were you by that shape, Scott?
I was a little surprised, but given how Walker, I think, wants to play, and given the sort of position that we're looking to put Nicholson in at times this season, it probably shouldn't have been too much of a surprise. Now, it worked, for instance, for the goal. I mean, I was actually moaning, screaming for Walker to show down the wing for Eckersley for that pass.
Do you sit right behind me?
And when he took that ball, I was like, what's he doing? And then it was a great strike. But in terms of defensively, it did not work. The amount of space that Gray and Stevenson got in both halves was ridiculous, and I'm very surprised that he didn't try and curb that at any stage.
That's a really interesting point, because I felt that's
not news. Those two are,
exactly
weapons for Hibs.
That's one area when we spoke about the game last week, we really pinpointed that, and that's a thing I think you have to look at as a failing on Robbie's part, that in a lot of senses, I think there's a general feel amongst Hearts supporters that Robbie gave Hibs too much focus. He worried too much about what they were going to do and didn't necessarily give the players the platform to do what they do best. But in one very big and obvious sense, he actually forgot all about Hibs' threat, in that David Gray had the freedom of the right flank at Tynecastle in the first half, and Stevenson to a certain extent second half. Now, it was more understandable second half because Stevenson carries less of a threat, and at that point we were trying something slightly different at least. But first half, it seemed like a rather schoolboy error to give Gray so much room when all you had to do was, Gomez playing as a default left midfielder when we didn't have the ball. That was a strange decision to draw him out of the engine room, especially when we had spoken so much about playing the 3 to win the midfield battle. Did that surprise you, Scott, to see him dragged out so wide?
It did, and I can understand that. I think that's where a lot of the frustration was coming from the stands. Now, the one thing I wouldn't agree on with the fans was, I think what the fans were wanting was an up and at 'em kind of derby, which is what we've been used to under certain other managers. Nielsen's not going to be doing that, I think we just need to get used to the fact that we've got a guy who's quite methodical. He's going to look to try and win things tactical. He's not going to just send 11 guys out there and just say, well, it's a derby, you know what to do.
He's not done that in any game.
But I think it's only been highlighted because it was a derby. I think the fans were just wanting us to, and we kind of alluded to it last week as well. We talked about wanting Patterson and Eckersley pushing further up the wings to push their fullbacks back, and because that wasn't happening, you could sense the frustration in the stands, which maybe was transferring to the park, because a lot of the first touches in the players in the first half was really off. I mean, say what you want about Nielsen tactically, but he can't help it if the players he sends out there aren't performing to their best, which a lot of them were. A lot of them were really under par in that first half.
But then you can question what role the tactic plays in allowing the players to play at their best. With that in mind, Ross, do you think that we are all acknowledging now that big aspects of that tactic didn't work, but we didn't really change it too much as the game went on? Hearts stuck with that tactic really and still tried to keep the defensive solidity that we seem to think it gave us, at least. With that in mind, do you think the shape worked the way expected? What did Robbie expect to gain from that tactic?
I was thinking that the way it was set out, that he was kind of looking to, so a bit the kind of double entendre or however you see it, but he was looking to double team their Gray and Stevenson. I was thinking,
got that image now.
I was thinking that if Gray's flying up the right wing, Gomez comes across, covers him inside, and obviously Eckersley covers him down the wing. It didn't seem to come that, that's what I was thinking was going to happen.
Yeah,
is that's how we set out. But I think the play, the way Hibs got out of the pitch, it was too quick. It was too much for those players to get into position at all times, and then when we win the ball back to go, oh right, okay, we've got the ball again, let's get back to where we're supposed to be. There was too much of a switch between when we had the ball and when we didn't have the ball. The same with Piardo as well, on the Hibs left. It just didn't seem to work for us in the first half. And when you've got a team running at you the way that Hibs did, when we had the ball, they were looking to win it back straight away. So then it was back to square one again. And Keating's didn't offer anything up front, so the ball was always in the danger area where Hibs have got their most dangerous players. Unfortunately for us, we didn't see any of the ball till the half time.
I think Keating's is a really good example of the line in terms of what Scott was talking about, where do you say that Keating's maybe didn't perform at the standards expected, and where do you say that Nielsen's tactics potentially gave him very little opportunity to actually perform to that level. Final question on the tactic for now, Sean. Would you be surprised to see us use that again? And if we do use it, are there any major tweaks that you could see that would instantly make it more viable as a tactic going forward?
I can see us using it again. I can't see us using it again against a higher calibre team.
Mikey, that was a compliment. Just note that one down.
But if you listen to the past couple of weeks,
you never said higher calibre to who, though?
No, I think going back to that game, I think Robbie's thought, we've got the three men in the midfield who are going to boss it. That'll allow our fullbacks to push on and keep their fullbacks pinned back. Because we've seen it all season, much as I think Hibs have seen it, that the fullbacks have been one of the strongest performers throughout the season. Whether it's been Patterson McGee on the right-hand side or the two left-backs, Eckersley or McCarthy, they're getting forward, and I think, have all four of them scored this season?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and Patterson's chipped in with quite a few. They're providing a good outlet, so I think that was, we'll control the centre of midfield, we'll have possession, and they can bomb on, pinning theirs back, which I can see working against other teams, but it failed miserably going back to the... I just didn't think... I think Piardo played well. The other two in the midfield didn't cut it for me at the weekend.
Okay. Final question before we'll quickly touch on personnel and then we'll get on to Hibs. How much of the way Hearts performed, and in particular the approach that the whole club took towards the game of the weekend, but especially Robbie Nielsen, how much of that for you, Scott, was affected or impacted by the unbeaten run and the psychological impact that being ended by Hibs could have had, both on Hearts and on the media portrayal of Hearts, potentially building up a collapse or something like that?
It's possible that was playing on his mind. But I do think a lot of it was just down to, he looked at the personnel. I think if Big Sol was fit, we would have seen a different Hearts team out there. I think that was ultimately what pushed his hand. He had to go that way. He had to try and hit them on the break, try and coax their centre halves further up the park and get Keating's playing in behind him. I just don't think he had any choice. If we'd went out there and tried to play a game of football, Hibs could have opened us up even easier than what they did at times in the first half, and we might have ended up walking away from that with a defeat. So he does have to get praise. I know he has had a little bit sort of criticism since Saturday, but I think he'd done what he had to do with the personnel that he had for that game.
I think in actual fact it was a little bit similar to the way we approached the last derby at Easter Road as well, and in actual fact when you look at it in terms of the performance, the second half was probably a better performance over a concerted period of time than we saw at any point at Easter Road. But the tactic actually played out the same way, in that we'll keep it relatively tight. If we're going to lose a goal, we'll lose one. But we
kept possession better in the second half.
Yeah, but what I think we actually did was we went out with a tactic to stop them playing as much as possible, keep it tight, and rely on an individual moment, or individual moments, if we could have got them, of brilliance to win us the game. Because I think Robbie does, we've said it a lot, he has got a lot of faith in his squad, and I do think he thought going out with a formation that in theory it could be seen as quite defensive, he's put a front three out there of guys, and he's thinking one of them will come up with something. And in actual fact, that worked out. That was the one thing that you can definitively say, if that was the case, that he got correct, because Walker did come up with a special moment, and that gave us enough to hold on to a point. On that moment then, Jamie Walker's goal, Thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was surprised that Jamie Walker and Nicholson were on the field at the same time, but going on the formation he played, it's understandable what I thought I was going to be doing. But I wasn't like Scott. I wasn't shouting, to give the ball back to Eckersley. But you know that they can do that type. King as well, Nicholson, any type. Those players get the ball and they start running towards the edge of the 18-yard box. They know they're going to have a dig. 9 times out of 10. A lot of the times don't come off, as we've seen. Even Patterson as well tries it quite a lot. But Jamie Walker's obviously just hit it as sweet as you can, and it's again another fantastic goal. And look at the goals that Hearts have been scoring this season. I mean, it's been absolutely brilliant. A lot from those areas, not just our wingers but our defenders doing it. So, piece of brilliance. It was good at the time that they were singing songs about him, the very time that he smashed the ball.
Okay, well, that's unfortunately for Hibs at least, they do have pre-cons for that. As you see, if you go back and watch that Hamilton game, the Jason Scotland song just starts up as he spins a man and sticks in the back of the net. So there's maybe a wee lesson to be learned that's somewhere in there. Right, before we're just about to wrap up on Hearts, the one point I want to touch on, we mentioned a lot that there was a few disappointing performances. Well, there's 2 points. Matthew Leslie, I think, got in touch with us on Twitter to ask how much of that was down to the players being jaded, and how hopeful are we that a signing or two would, in theory, remove that, would pick everyone up again at this stage. Is there any question that the players are jaded at this moment in time, Sean?
No, I think they are jaded. I think that goes down to the bad run and the slight rut we're in. As much as
the bad run?
No, you know what I mean. The lack of performances or the
lack of dominance that we showed there.
Pretty much. We're not going out there and putting 4 or 5 past the teams that we were earlier in the season. It's not. Although we're still getting results, which is brilliant, and that's, as we've said a couple of times this season, that's the sign of champions, that you can grind out the points even when you're not playing well. But it would help if you were playing well. So I think that's had to be knocked to the confidence. I think bringing a player or two in, especially if it's a striker, or if we could just get Osman so fit, would be a massive boost. But yeah, as long as it's not going to be a Balotelli or
he might be available.
Anyone who's going to upset the dressing room, I kind of see it being a bad thing bringing in someone. Okay,
we've mentioned that the players failed to perform across the board. Scott, you've mentioned that in particular. My final question on Hearts to both yourself and Scott Ross, because Sean's mentioned already that it was Gallardo for him probably. Was there any player that you felt was worthy of specific mention that stuck out, or that really continued at a task even when we were struggling at points in the game?
I thought Eckersley and Walker were our 2 standouts. I think Walker was looking for the ball in decent areas of the park. Obviously the goal helps when you look back on his performance. I thought Nicholson was doing some good things on the ball, but it was in areas where he wasn't going to hurt Hibs. I mean, that run that he had at the start of the second half, superb.
I'm glad you touched on that.
You
that
want that
amazing.
to be 20 yards further up the park, and that's been the problem with Nicholson for a good couple of months now. He's not doing it in the right areas of the park. Eckersley again, excellent. It's solid, really good going forward as well, putting a great ball that Fontaine done brilliantly with, cutting out in the second half. They'd be the 2 standouts for me. To
be fair to Nicholson, just to touch on that for a tiny moment, I know exactly what you mean in terms of he's doing it 10 yards inside his own half. But again, I think that's potentially a failing of the system, because there was one moment first half where him and Jamie Walker did a wee bit interchange between the two, and it actually fashioned a chance, one of the very few chances of the first half for Hearts. But the problem was the system, because Keatings wasn't leading the line in the classic sense. It was rare that the ball was breaking to the 2 supporting men 30 yards out for goal. They were having to pick it up 10 yards inside their own half, and that's when they were a wee bit limited. Ross, last point on Hearts from the weekend. Who was your standout? Anyone deserving of praise?
Absolutely, Gallardo for me. Solid, even when the kind of team was crumbling around him. He didn't have the greatest of first halves either, but by the end of the match, man of the match for me, absolutely. Solid, really gave the ball away in the right position all the time. Fair enough, he was more towards Hibs' left, which is kind of the weaker side. I would have liked to have maybe switched him over to the more problematic right, but then Gray came off, thankfully. I don't think Booth maybe had the best games, but again, he was forced into a derby.
Yeah.
You don't expect him to do any more. But yeah, Piardo for me, man of the match.
Perfect. Mikey, let's talk Hibs.
Yeah.
First and foremost, are you positive or negative after that experience?
You've got to be positive. We can sort of cling on to the fact that the majority of Hibs fans will feel we should have won over the 90 minutes, but I don't think there's any sort of great negativity to take from that result and that performance. I think the intensity that they played with in the first half was always going to be difficult to maintain for the full game, on the same way that Hearts weren't going to be quite so passive for the entire 90 minutes as well as they were in the first half. So there was going to be a bit of an ebb and flow, but overall you've got to say definite positivity from it. A lot of good performances. We're now going to Tynecastle, even the first game of the season, the first derby of the season, as a team who had just been relegated in quite humiliating circumstances. We didn't play with a great deal of fear or kind of an inferiority complex. It's been a long time. A far better Hibs sides have gone to Tynecastle and put in really chicken-hearted performances. So there's a lot of good individual performances, a good team performance as well. There was a lot of togetherness, a complete commitment to like that kind of the philosophy that Stubbs is putting in place, and I think it bodes really well for the second half of the season that we're coming away from Tynecastle, coming away from the second derby and all thinking we should have won that, and I don't think that anyone would have anticipated that probably sort of September time.
As we did with Hearts then, let's focus on the negatives that existed from the experience before we then get on to praising the guys who performed well. That this is a positive and a negative in one sentence. That's only the second time that Hearts have trailed this season, and it's the second time it was Hibs that did it. Hearts trailed for the first time at Easter Road and on Saturday again. How disappointing was it that you weren't able to at least solidify that lead, until half time, to really get in and to let the crowd maybe start to turn and the fear that this unbeaten record is coming to an end here?
Absolutely, it would have been fantastic to go in at half time and have a different type of team talk. The performance in the first half and the way we controlled the match, the way the fullbacks were providing that really massive additional attacking outlet for us, allowed us at times to play with literally two defenders for large parts of the game against the one centre forward. Robertson didn't have to sit quite so much. You were getting Gray, Handley and Allen in and around the box. For me, not into the box enough times, given how often we had the ball in wide areas. But I think that we can't be too despondent about the nature of the goal that was scored. It was something out of nothing. Allen's kind of undone his great work for the first goal by probably going out of it to approaching Walker too quickly and being completely off balance, and Walker's cut inside and had that strike. So it's been fantastic going at half time, one piece, but the quality of the performance, they should have still gone in with that kind of we've dominated this, we are out there for 45 minutes, we are the better side right now, and we'd have played it differently. Would Hearts have come out even more, have a bigger kicking up the backside than they probably got anyway? I'm not sure if it would have affected the result a great deal. Hearts probably were going to get a goal at some point. We've been better in defence, but we're still not rock solid. I appreciate against Rangers, isn't he, making us a good defence?
Let's touch on that point then. I want to park the Gray topic because that is a big discussion to assess how much that impacted the second half performance. But for now, on the defensive side, there is still a wee bit of a defensive frailty to Hibs, and I think we saw it in that there was a couple of missed kicks. Hanlon missed kicks it, and then he left a wee bit open. As you say, Allen not knocks off, that's probably a bit harsh, but he's slow to react. Is there a defensive frailty to that system that Stubbs is using, that you're potentially, as you say, you got away with Rangers because they rarely, if they at all, threatened, but against better teams more capable of those individual moments, is there a wee bit of concern that a back four that still isn't the most solid is left quite exposed by having, I know we've seen Robertson and Craig play holding midfield, but they didn't necessarily want to play holding midfield, and that was one of the big problems before. Having no protection for the full-backs from a defensive perspective, is that a worry when you're coming up against better teams, or as the season wears on? Hibs have been playing that formation for quite a long time now. People may start to pull it apart and suss it out. Is that a worry?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't think that we're looking to build a team that is a really rock solid defence, because that always takes away from your ability. I think it's at our level anyway. We're not talking about Chelsea here, who have got a world class defence and attack as well. I think there's an overemphasis on creating this sort of rock solid defensive structure. I think we focused too much on that in the early part of the season when Stubbs was sort of changing the system a little bit, and I think he tried to make us defensively solid to allow a bit of confidence to build, to then become a bit more expressive going forward. We've been getting results the last while when our better players are being allowed to express themselves going forward, and I think that we're almost going to have to take that risk going forward the rest of the season, that it may expose us at the back a little bit, but in this division I don't think it's too blasé to say that we've got good enough players to more often than not score more goals than the opposition. And in a game like Tynecastle, the way we started the game, you probably, I think the guys had the right to play very attacking and take risks, because Hearts threatened very rarely in that first half and almost gave Hibs that sense of, well, let's just keep plodding on, like they're not hurting us in the fullback areas when there's no fullbacks there, because we've got the ball, we have possession, we're in the Hearts half, we're not at great risk, so there's going to be elements of risk to it, but I think that we can hopefully now counterbalance that with more confidence at the moment that we're going to score goals, whereas that just didn't exist a few months ago. We're like, if we lose a goal, we're not going to win the day, whereas I think now that's not the case.
Okay, segueing into the positives through a performance that contained elements of both. Scott Allen's a player who's got a lot of plaudits this season, especially over the last couple of months, is a player that we've paid a lot of attention to on this programme, and because of that is a player whose performances are now watched in a different light than potentially other players. Was Allen as influential as some made him out to be on Saturday? Was there actually more scope for him to influence the game at points than he did?
Probably. Like, I'd sort of hinted to you guys in our own conversations that his performances weren't going to go unnoticed by Hearts and that he was going to be paid more attention. He certainly didn't appear to be man-marked in a specific fashion, because I think the first half Hearts were a wee bit in disarray in that midfield area, and there wasn't really... Handling seemed to always have somebody around them, but not because he was playing that bit closer to the strikers, but Craig and Allen did have a good amount of space around them.
The Hearts midfield three did noticeably sit deep, which allowed Allen to drop in and pick the ball up and kind of drive at the Hearts midfield if he chose.
His strength in the last few games has been driving at the defence, but without that midfield screen.
Yeah.
Especially against Rangers, like the midfield were non-existent. Hearts allowed Allen to pick the ball up and go on those driving runs, but he had to get through a line of midfielders before he got to the defence. That's why you didn't see a lot of his little passes inside the fullback that he's played a lot of in the last few weeks and created against Wraith Rovers and Rangers and getting assists. So I think that although he wasn't man-marked, there was a certain acknowledgement when he had the ball that, can I just let him have it? We've got a row of 4 and a row of 3. Like, he's going to have to do something special to create anything here, which he did once. But beyond that, I think that he was nullified pretty well without necessarily having to commit somebody or like sacrificing somebody to go, if he's got the toilet, then you're buttoning him back up.
Which I think is what we expected would possibly happen, especially with a guy like Gallardo there, who seems to be a defensive influence. We kind of expected it just to be a one-on-one battle and let's see who wins. And in actual fact, you're right, it wasn't really that. Allen was given opportunities to do it. That's why I asked the question in the way that I did, because I just wonder, I think a lot of people looked at it thinking he pulled all the strings, but I do think he was kind of given the opportunity to pull all the strings.
Absolutely.
And the question was, did he pull as many strings as he could have or should have? And I think there are different opinions on that, really.
If you look at it, the amount of possession that he had and the touches he had of the ball, and he had that one phenomenal assist, but did he create a great deal in that? Probably not, no. But I think there was a sort of a backhanded compliment paid to him that we're not going to necessarily stop him at the source, because he's very, very good in those tight positions where if somebody's up his backside, he'll turn them quick, or he'll release somebody really quickly. Let's see what he's like when he's got 10-15 yards in front of him, but a lot of bodies and a lot of decisions to make. So a different type of performance from Allen. Still putting a good performance, still played well. He's not going to be afforded the same space by teams now that, especially the last 3-4 weeks, his performances have really gone to a really high level, and teams are going to take notice of that, and Hearts set up in an intelligent fashion without paying him too much respect, and more an acknowledgement that he's going to be dangerous. But had a lot of the ball, played well, certainly it wasn't wasteful,
brought the fullbacks into the game quite a lot. Tried to be urgent, tried to replicate I think his performance against Rangers, and maybe got a bit frustrated at times that he wasn't able to have the same influence, but perfectly happy with how he played on that wee defensive moment. He probably got, it's not often that he's in that kind of position to provide the extra cover. Usually he's the guy that's coming back.
Well, that was what
he got a bit too excited almost, and
that was the thing that I was touching on in the system, and that does mean that guys like, especially when you bring McGeoch on later in the game, who's another positive that we'll touch on a wee bit just as we start to wrap up on the Hibs side of things. But when you're playing, in theory, Alan could actually be utilised as a number 10, but in order to get masses of creativity in that side, you then shoehorn him in as one of the two in the diamond. And in theory, that probably shouldn't necessarily be the case. You should have someone who is more of an all-rounder in there, a box-to-box guy, whereas Alan is so much more focused on going forward than going back. But that, like you say, it's a necessary sacrifice to try and get as many people contributing in a creative sense on the park as possible.
I hope that we could maybe find a proper sitting holding midfielder, then Robertson can be one of these. To me, he was signed as a box-to-box midfielder.
And we have seen a massive improvement in him over the last couple of months.
Absolutely. He's playing this deeper role, but in that goal against Rangers, we're seeing that more from him, and not that he's scoring every week, but he's bombing on, he's getting forward. With him and Craig, they're having quite an awareness of one goes, one stays.
Yeah.
And that's become much, much better. If we can find somebody who can play that proper holding role, who actually likes to play it, it might be that you see McGeoch and Robertson become the box-to-box guys, and you see Alan playing that 10. But then if Alan's playing that close to the strikers, does he get the space to work in that's been quite useful to him, like driving on and creating that uncertainty? Whereas if he's got the ball quite close to the strikers, defenders, like, he's going to slip in a pass here, he's not going to run at us because he's 5 yards away from us. So it'll be interesting to see how his effectiveness goes up or down by playing in the 10 and being that little bit further forward and being able to see some passes but not maybe drive on quite so much.
Okay, interesting. It's a really odd scenario here how different the conversations we're having about the teams are, because partly the way the seasons are playing out, Robbie Neilson is changing the tactics every single week and utilising every element of his squad, whereas Alan Stubbs is in a slightly more limited position in terms of what is at his disposal, but also took a while at the start of the season struggling through a number of different systems and personnel, and has now found one that works, so quite rightly is sticking to that because it's getting him results. Because of that though, we're in the Hearts conversation we entirely focused on Neilson, or in the main at least. Here it's almost pointless talking about Alan Stubbs because he's found a system that works and he's going to stick to it until like we say, someone starts to suss it out or something. So it's really, you can just focus entirely on the players. Last couple of things then before I throw it to you to single out anyone that we've not already spoken about or that's special. Let's talk on David Gray. We will talk in a minute about where we go from here. What impact did it have in the second half on Saturday? Would it have been a completely different game if he carried on?
I'll say yes. I believe it would have. There's when a guy's playing with the confidence he's playing with, he's going to be in positions constantly to demand the ball and want the ball. Hearts are going to be more wary of him, given the first 45 minutes that he had, given the moments he's had in the season. He spends large parts of the game in the opposition half. Callum Booth came on. He's a lefty playing on the right. He's not been playing every week. I don't think he had a bad game when he came on. Almost set up the winner at the end. Good tackle for Ozturk on Boyle, but like Stevenson last season, you're asking a guy to consistently either have a swing with his right foot or cut back inside, which I think deters the midfield or the centre halves from giving them the ball in the first place, because it disrupts the natural flow that they've been developing of let the ball run across him onto his right foot and just bomb on. That's not going to be in Booth's instinct. He's going to take it and almost close the game back off by coming back inside. So I think it immediately starts to change the decision making from other players on the pitch as to whether he takes the ball or not, as to what kind of runs they make. If the ball's on his right foot, is he going to be able to play an accurate a pass up the line or inside as he would if he was playing at left back?
I thought that was the one really interesting decision that we actually saw play out from Stubbs, and that substitution's been made a number of times over the last few weeks, and every time I've seen it made prior to now, Booth played left back and Stevenson went right, and you saw a noticeable drop off in Stevenson's performance, but it gave the side more of a balance. It was really odd to see, in arguably the biggest of all those games, the most important, that he changed that and he left Booth in at right back, because it almost almost put a bullseye on Booth for 10-15 minutes where you thought he could really be got at here, until he acquitted himself and proved that I'm all right here, I can do this. But it appeared as a weakness straight away, because why have you never trusted him there
I think
before?
possibly putting him in at left back, the Hearts may have gone, let's get Patterson on top of him, right on top of him. He's not playing a lot, he's rusty, he's defensively suspect, let's get Patterson's fantastic in there, let's get him diagonals into him and stick him on top of him. Stevenson's not a big guy, but he's playing with confidence. He's playing well just now. A bit more accomplished as a defender, and they've probably quite happily gone toe to toe with Patterson.
And possibly just that thing of no disrupting the rest of the system if that was working. You slot him in as a direct replacement, and then you didn't have to rewrite
one position rather than the two of them. So
I think Stubbs was actually happy with him going forward, but if you look at the substitution in McGeoch looked like he was there to cover for Booth as well. I think there was one or two times Hearts did look quite dangerous going down the left, and Eckersley putting a couple of decent balls. I think that's going to be the problem if Booth's the long-term solution. Defensively, he's not up to scratch, right or left back. He's fine going forward, but they're going to have to actually put somebody in front of him, which is not the way Hibs want to play just now. They want to play the diamond.
Well, let's park that for 5 minutes, because we're about to go on to where Hibs go from here. We'll check back to Hearts. Final question on Hibs in terms of Saturday's game. Were there any other, noticeably we've not spoken about Jason Cummings really at all, so give us 30 seconds to a minute on him.
Talks enough about himself.
And then, he is zing apparently, whatever that means. And then give us any other people that we've not mentioned enough.
Cummings played well. He is starting to show a bit more of game intelligence and a wee bit of that kind of sort of penalty box instinct. Still makes silly decisions. When he got that chance like really early on.
I thought you just meant on his Twitter.
Oh no, I'm talking purely football here. He with a camera head, when he took that touch, he had the option to either carry it forward, slip in Malonga possibly, and he kind of just panicked and took a bit of a shot that went right down the keeper's throat. Conversely, a little bit later on, just made a really, really cute wee run to the back post, a good finish. Then seconds later, stupidly gets booked. So he's a roller coaster, and then obviously he's had a great chance 5-10 minutes after the goal. But I thought him longer. I think it was 2-0. So it's great that he plays with confidence. He's got that about him. I don't think he tends to get his head down too much. If he does miss a chance, and parts of the season he's been missing chances. Doesn't seem to faze him. But I think that he's going to have to, especially in those big matches, he's the only comparison I can make with him just now with Lee Griffiths is that his temperament could maybe be questioned at times, and he kicked the ball away. Did he really kick the ball away? But he's opening opportunities to get himself into bother, and the celebration thing, obviously he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder with Hearts as a whole with the way he was released, but I think in general he played well. Plays far better with Malonga next to him, with somebody with intelligence. It'll be interesting to see how he plays with El Alagui late in the season, a different type of striker where he's maybe going to have to be the guy who has a bit more movement and a bit more mobility about him, playing off Alagui, where Cummins is playing as the 9 just now and Malonga plays a bit sort of wider. But I think there's loads to come from him. I've had a bit of a kind of 50-50 season. I think it's maybe 6-7 goals he's got now, so chipping away quite consistently, and I think he's primed for a good second half of the season.
Any other quick hits then?
First half, David Gray definitely was influential, although in the same way his quality in the box wasn't as good as normal. And when the ball was on the left hand side, he didn't quite get himself in the box as often as possible, but that's probably paying respect to the threat that Hearts could have posed. That if you get a quick counter attack, he can't be quite as gung-ho as I just can't against teams like Rangers, for example.
Especially if Stevenson's the one throwing it in the box and Gray's trying to head it into the back stick, it leaves you quite exposed at the back.
I think also his fitness comes into that a bit as well, falling into the back post. There's a reason he's coming off in the second half of every game just now.
He's probably feeling that injury. I think that for me, Liam Fontaine is absolutely solid as a rock, and now match fit. Like you see with Alan, now he's match fit. You're seeing we've got a guy who's a good player, who's absolutely more than capable of playing at this championship level, and will probably, if we go up, would acquit himself well in the Premier League as well. I think he's definitely shown the pedigree that he's got. I think he was another really, really good performer. Beyond that, I don't think there was any other standouts. There was a lot of, for me, a lot of 7 out of 10 performances from Hibs players, but I thought Fontaine was excellent, and Allen had his moment here and there. Cummins played well.
Good. I'm glad we've mentioned Fontaine, because he did stick out as being someone who looked like he's established himself a wee bit more in the heart of that defence, and that he'll now lead from there. Because I think there's always been a wee bit of a question about, as experienced as Hanlon is now, he doesn't really seem to lead, he doesn't really dominate a situation, whereas Fontaine looks the one capable of doing that. Okay, let's move on to the quick hits then, because we're at 10-2 and I'm determined to get finished as close to 11 as possible. We're being professional this week. So on Hearts, just 2 or 3 minutes on this, so quick hits for each of you. The next 2 games, they seem massive, Dumbarton and Rangers. What are your thoughts on those 2, Scott? Is it as simple as win both of those and we're almost there in terms of winning the league?
I think so. Obviously, with each week that passes, if we keep on getting 3 points, it doesn't really matter what Rangers are going to do or not do. I mean, they should just be worrying about paying the bills just now anyway. But like Saturday hasn't knocked any confidence I think we should all have, in Gorgie in terms of going up anyway. It was just a case he had to try something due to the personnel, and that was it. We got a draw, which ultimately benefited us more than Hibs when you look at the other results with Queen of the South and Falkirk at the weekend. So yeah, I think we should be aiming for 6 points, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't get that.
Ross, my feeling with this round of fixtures, the round of fixtures about to come, is that essentially Hearts are, with a win, crossing off competitors for the, crossing off challengers for the title as we go there. I think if you go to Ibrox and win, even although now it's only 16 points, the way it rocks their confidence again and everything like that, I think you can almost cross them off the list. Is that, if we win, obviously we're not counting our chickens, but is that why it's so important to win at Dumbarton, go in knowing that at the very worst, as long as we avoid defeat, it'll be 13 points and you can almost start to cross Rangers off as challengers?
Yeah, and we briefly touched on that last week as well, in terms of it is about ticking boxes at this moment in time, because look at all the questions we've had over the season. It's they'll never last at this little run at the beginning of the season. It's going to finish. They'll never get to Christmas. They'll never get January's a tricky spell. Each time these little groups of games come along and the questions that are put to us, and we're answering them every week now, I think this Rangers game coming up, we're actually getting them at their lowest, and possibly, depending on what happens off the field, obviously if you're looking at the news more recently, that it could be even worse for them. And Lee Wallace is saying goodbye to the fans. McLeod is gone. It's one of those things that... Are they going to be a wounded animal that's ready just to hit us when we're thinking, right, okay, we just turn up? I don't think. We've got Robbie Nielsen there. We've got Robbie Nielsen. That's not going to happen. But I don't know. It's just one of these things where I still believe it won't be a walkover at Ibrox. I believe we'll win. I believe we'll beat Dumbarton as well. But these next 2 games are... I think if we win both these games, I'm going to go out and say the league is won.
Okay, Sean, to move on to a slightly different topic then, how important is, especially looking over the next round of fixtures, how important is a striking addition to the squad at this stage to ensure that Hearts can continue the momentum?
I would say it's hugely important. Going back to it, I've said, and Scott touched on it earlier, if we had Osman Sow at this point in time, it gave us so much more options going into that Hibs game. It just gives you variation. Just now we've literally got one fit striker, and then Gary Oliver's came back in off loan
legally, we're told.
Yeah, it was pre-arranged. He could be called at any point. It's ridiculous.
Who's got no proven track record in the Hearts first team either, and we've saw, or certainly I've felt when he's came on in the past couple of weeks, he's trying hard, but he really can't play that position, certainly not at this moment in time up top on his own, although he's just probably about the same size as Keaton's. You can tell Keaton's is an older guy and has a bit more physicality about him, so he can try and hold the ball up. If we could bring in a striker, especially a striker, whether it's from further afield or someone who's established at this level, it would be a huge thing. Just someone with a wee bit experience who can bring in something and a different facet to what we've got just now. Because we saw that at the start of the season, we had 3 or 4 strikers, all who brought different things, and it was that variation that was great. So if we can get a wee bit of variation again, that would be brilliant going forward.
Scott, I know you've been pretty clear in your views that a striker's a massive thing for us at the moment, maybe a focal point, I think you've said. Is it more important to bring a new striker in to give us something, a different dimension, as Sean's touched on there, than to get the current strikers back fit? Or is it equally important? Would you rather have, for example, a new striker playing against Dumbarton on Saturday, assuming a level of quality, or would you rather have Osman Sow back in the team?
I'd rather have Osman Sow back in the team, but I think it's been proven, not just with Hearts but with his previous clubs, this guy has injury problems, so we're going to have to look long term probably at getting another forward in anyway, of his sort of stature. We do have other options with Carrick and Keatons and that, but we do definitely need to bring someone in, whether it's for a long-term plan or if it's someone with a short-term option, like what we've done with guys like Beattie in the past, where it's, you know, maybe a 10-match thing, get somebody in that's got a bit of experience, then yeah, that's definitely what we've got to look to try and do over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, I'm going to be a bit naughty and I'm going to throw in a completely different question to wrap up this section in terms of where do we go from here before we move back on to Hibs and we talk about their next quarter. I want points totals for this quarter. So we know we've got 1 from this game, but if you just discount that, so we're talking over 8 games, so maximum of 24 points. We're not necessarily predicting what they're going to get here. What I'm saying is, what target are you setting out? Hearts achieving the aim of winning the title and, you know, hopefully from a Hearts perspective with something to spare. What target are you setting at the moment that ensures that there's no kind of impending collapse being predicted? Ross, what's your target points from the next possible 24?
Apart from the couple of games that we're going to be setting out tactically, as we've mentioned before, 22 for me.
So what is that? A draw at Ibrox, preferably, and then winning every other game?
Yes.
That's your target? Okay.
Why not?
No, I know. I just.
If you're
I'm
asking
wondering
me
about
to say,
a worst case scenario. What would be acceptable to still keep us dominant in terms of the lead, but
for if you're saying that maybe we get more injuries and the January transfer window doesn't go away or anything like that, and we're looking at a group of games where stuff's not going our way, then I'd probably say 16.
Sean, what's your minimum expectation?
Minimum I'd go with, and it still being a positive run, is 18 points. I think we've proved it already this season. We really shouldn't be dropping points, and that's on the proviso as well that those 18s are draws.
Yeah. So no losses but draws.
No, the whole thing is, if we were to get beat by Hibs, that's fine. The Hibs have showed they're a good team. They would have been worthy of taking the unbeaten run off us. Any other teams in the league, even Rangers at this moment in time, shouldn't be taking that off us.
I'm not sure many people will agree with it.
It's fine.
The motto, the motto that it's fine. But I understand what you mean. If you look at
they would have been to the level
bigger picture
that you couldn't
objectively,
have
if you look at quality, you can say they're of a level and in form that you could justify a defeat.
Whereas if we went to Alloa and Stephen Simmons is celebrating 3 points against Hearts, that would not be justified.
Scott, what are you looking at, mate?
Our target should be 24 points.
I know our target should be. That's why I didn't phrase the question that way.
All right.
Because I knew that you
20,
would throw that at me.
Say 20. Let's throw a couple of draws in there. One at Rangers and, one against Raith Rovers away or something. I don't know.
But that, for you, that would be enough to keep the ball rolling, the momentum in our...
The big thing is, Rangers have got one more chance to really do damage to us, because at the end of the day, the next round of games, we're at home to them in the last day of the season. Mm-hmm. So that really doesn't count for anything. That's why I don't understand when Rangers players still go on about how they're playing it. Yeah, true, you do have to play us twice. But one of those games is the last day of the season. The point score's probably going to be too high by that stage.
There is really, once you see the run of fixtures after the Rangers game, because of randomly the way the fixtures has worked, where we've suddenly gone from playing Rangers on the first game of the season
randomly,
playing Rangers on the first game of the season away to playing them the last game of the season at home, and you think, well, we've skipped like 9 games there. Because of the way that works out, Hearts have actually got a run of a huge number of fixtures before they go to Easter Road, whereas the points sit at the moment, if they win all of those, the league's won before they even go to Easter Road. Right, we're almost bang on 11 o'clock, so we're obviously going to go a wee bit over, but we'll try and only be 10 minutes over. Mikey, from a Hibs perspective, where do you go from here, particularly taking into the equation the loss or the impending losses of David Gray and Malonga?
I think that the confidence is there amongst the team. There's momentum. There's a style of play that's working. Stubbs has already started shaking up the personnel a wee bit. Kennedy's gone back to Everton, which will open up a cross-border loan space. Harris has gone to Dundee in exchange for Boyle. So I think that's also telling that there's two wingers that have gone out the door, and he's brought a guy in who is a kind of sort of winger / striker. I'm not going to call him a kind of Thierry Henry character, but
I think that's probably preferable for him.
Tony Rougier maybe. But I think there's only positivity to look at for the moment. We're night and day from the start of the season in terms of the quality of the football. Obviously the confidence was in pieces. So I think that he's started to do his business early doors. I do see other people coming in.
I'm not going to ask for names of individuals because I'm not expecting it in any way to be in the know, but what positions would you envisage being strengthened?
I think it does need to look at a right back solution. Foster's not far away from fitness, and he'll be like a new signing. I don't think he's played at all this season, and he has played right back previously, but I think his future is as a centre half, and we do need that centre half cover. So there's seemingly a couple of guys, a couple of younger guys in the youth, but might not be quite ready yet. And we're still trying to go for second place. So I think
especially when you're looking for so much from your right back as an attacking option as well.
I think that right back would be good. I would quite like to see a guy who will play holding midfield who really enjoys it.
A specialist.
A guy who likes kicking people and passing the ball 10 yards would be great.
Ian Black might be available, I don't know. Tumbleweed.
So could I though. A guy who plays that role well.
Okay, that was the qualifier required.
He does kick people well.
He does, and we probably need to say a striker. Obviously, Boyle seems to be one part of an answer, but it really depends on how long they're looking at El Alagoui still being out for, and if they can shift on Heffernan. If Heffernan sticks about, we're stuck with him, and they won't have the budget to bring another striker unless he goes. So I think that's probably where we're looking realistically to strengthen the team. If we get a holding midfielder that adds another option to that kind of sort of diamond area, if you like, the sides of the diamond, where Robertson can move forward a wee bit, and I think one right back, or a centre half that means Foster can specifically be a right back. Beyond that, I don't think you want to shake it up too much. There's momentum, there's consistency, the guys understand the system and the way they should be playing now, so I don't think there's a need to really kind of sort of ratchet up too much.
Looking at momentum then, and the final question on this subject, we've spoken a fair bit over the last few weeks and months when it comes to Hibs about setting achievable targets. That game at the weekend, the failure to gain points on Hearts, certainly Scott Allen seemed to suggest in his interview that he now sees first as a distant hope. It would take a major collapse to the point where they've now kind of discounted that, and he says second's now the target. Is there a real requirement for Hibs now to almost forget Hearts and really, in order to gain momentum, not continue to look at that gap that just isn't closing, because now Hibs can't do anything about whether Hearts win or lose games? Is it really important to just focus on what they can do, which is reeling Rangers in, getting into second place and making sure that the playoff campaign is as easy and straightforward as it can be?
Arguments for yes and no. I think it's still important to consider the gap between us and Hearts, because at the moment I don't know how Rangers are going to go with their form, and if it might not be that they're going to be the best barometer for us to take, because it could be that if they completely just fall to pieces and we think that we've gained 4 points on Rangers, but what if Queen of the South or Falkirk continue to pick up points and they're actually right on our tails? So I think that to retain, if Hearts continue to keep winning as they have been so far, then if we continue to be 16 points behind Hearts for the rest of the season and you guys keep winning, then we'll have kept winning.
Yeah.
Whereas
set yourself the highest yardstick.
Who knows what Rangers are going to do, and it might not be the most accurate and adequate measure. So we want to close the gap on Hearts. That should be the aim. That come the end of the season we have closed the gap on Hearts.
Is there any concern on your part though that then, say for instance the gap hasn't closed, but you're still, or the gap's widened, but you finish second? Is there any concern that because you've been so focused on closing that gap, you're going in, you're almost limping into the playoffs despite playing well, and that you feel like but we failed in that objective? Hearts have won the league by for example 21 points or something, whereas you could be going in with real momentum of we've overhauled Rangers and we're in this
But not realistically, if we do overhaul Rangers, like I get where you're coming from. I think that it's not a bunch of 16-year-old boys who are going to be like demotivated by like sort of not hitting that big target. We never made the big final, or whatever it might be. It'll give us a good measure and something that will motivate the players to continue driving forward. But if we go into the end of the season, we finish second and we're 4 points in the Rangers, I think pretty quickly they'll dust themselves off and go, we're going to have yous. We were many points behind you earlier in the season, and we're now sitting second. Over 2 legs, we're going to take you out. So I think that I don't think that we're now so mentally fragile that they're going to fall to pieces, because we finished 18 points behind Hearts and we're 17 when we set out this target. So it gives us a good measure. As long as Hearts retain their form, then us measuring the gap between ourselves and Hearts gives us a proper means of judging how well and how consistent we've been. I don't think until we know how the Rangers sort of January goes, I don't really know how accurate us catching them is going to sort of tell how well we're playing.
It's not advisable for anyone at this moment in time to use Rangers as a yardstick for performance in any area of football, I would say, or business, come to think of it. Right, we're going to wrap up with something
I'm
a wee
going
bit
to say
different.
as well 20 points for Hibs.
Okay.
20
is the aim or is the minimum?
Aim. Minimum's awfully exceptional. We're away to Rangers and away to Queen of South, where I potentially see draws.
Right.
So
the reason I was talking about minimums with Hearts, I wasn't to in any way be expectant or anything, but you're in a different scenario where you're trying to kind of ride out a title race and just try and see off the challenge, which is obviously, as you say, a wee bit different for Hibs, who are trying to eat away at that lead.
Looking at the fixtures, I believe that the way they've set up this time round, I think there's 6 wins and two draws there.
That's the big thing. I think Hibs need to go on another unbeaten run, but this time it needs to be a winning run as well as unbeaten. It needs to feel like they're actually eating into the points differential and that there's real movement up the table.
If we came to this conversation 9 games from now, or 8 games from now, and we've picked up 20 points, 20 points, I strongly believe that we'll be ahead of Rangers, or we'll be level with Rangers. Cause I think they're still in an absolute farcical position.
I think we all agree with that. They're an absolute.
I don't think the bodies have stopped going.
No,
as well. Seemingly Boyd's going to be off to back to Kilmarnock for what I'm kind of.
Well, it's gone to Huddersfield as well.
They're an absolute basket case at the moment, and because of that, you never know which Rangers are going to turn up.
Looking at the results, I think the mentality that's now been instilled, having guys like a Fontaine who's been out in the block, probably quite a good leader in the dressing room. Guys like Gray, I think that there's going to be a real momentum now coming and going. Like we're going to take this on. We can beat anybody in this league. Doesn't matter if it's on their place or ours. I don't see us winning all 8 matches, so that's what I'm saying. I think 18-20 is a good number, and I think it's achievable as well.
Perfect. Let's wrap up on something completely different, which is our Monday Night Football End of Year Awards. Scott, I am going to throw over to you, and you are going to chair this debate because you have been our vote counter.
Yeah, always get the glamorous job.
Are you the guy that counts the seats as well on kickback?
Yeah, we decided for a little bit of fun we'd try and go for our 2014 awards for the show, and we just picked 7 categories, and we got guys on sort of kickback.net and a few other people over Twitter and that to cast some votes over the last few days. Now, first category is best goal. Now, the winner was by some bit of a landslide, was the Ostert goal against Hibs. Other notable mentions were Patterson's goal against Cowdenbeath and also Scott Robertson's goal against Hibs.
Okay, just maybe a minute discussion on each.
Against Rangers, yeah.
I did not.
You know what it is? I'm so used. You know what it is? I'm so used to writing down Robertson against Hibs that's what I've actually written down there.
Very
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Okay,
yes.
right. Just a quick one round the room. Are we all happy with Ostert as the winner of that? Not happy, Mikey, but
delighted.
Grudgingly
Mikey's delighted. Look at the smile on his face.
That. If he was in purple and you were watching it on Dream Team, would you go, that's an amazing goal? Who's that? Gerard Julie is going to sign him.
Dream Team reference.
My vote was for Ostert, so I'm not going to say disagree with that too much. It was just an absolutely galling, horrible, dirty moment. But definitely. But unless Hearts scored anything particularly impressive in their second half of the Premier League season. We don't think we scored about 4 times anyway, so there's not much to pick from. So Ozturk seems a fair call. It's just an absolute scunner, the nature of it.
I think we're all happy with that one then, at least.
Okay, the next one was quite contentious. There was a few, different people that got nominated for this, including Adam Eckersley, who at his age I'm not quite sure you'd count as a breakthrough player. But moving on, the winner was Sam Nicholson, who just slightly nudged out Jason Cummings and Billy King. Me personally, I voted for King because I think if you look back 12 months, King didn't look physically or ability-wise look like he could play the full 90 minutes in a Hearts jersey every week, yet he's came on leaps and bounds. Still got obviously a bit of inconsistency, but looks a far definite better player.
I think Nicholson's an interesting one because I rate him really highly, but I think he's really struggled this season. Actually, I think he's failed to flourish so far. So from that perspective, it's an odd one. I actually might have gone a wee bit thinking outside the box a wee bit. This I think I might have gone with Dale Carrick, because there was a real question mark over him as to whether he was just a kind of Graham Weir type. He grafted really hard, and people know they've been in a game, but he'll never score a goal.
Yeah, definitely.
He'll never score a goal. He's not a goal threat. And in actual fact, towards that, that winning run at the end of the season in the SPL, he was the man leading the line. He was the goal threat. And then again this season, like you say, in the moments that we've seen him, the one thing you could say is that he does carry a threat. I mean, he came on for a 25-minute cameo and rifled 2 in from 20 yards, which I think we all thought was behind him. So thinking outside the box a wee bit, I think I would have gone for him. Just before we go around the rest of the guys on that one, who were the other 2?
Jason Cummings was second and Billy King was third.
Okay, Mikey.
I went Cummings. I'd felt that if you're talking to a breakthrough star, I think a lot of the Hearts players got their chance at the start of last season. I think in terms of the nature of it being a breakthrough, I think most of those guys' names were more well known.
That's why I think Nicholson is a valid winner, because he was one that was seen as not being physically ready at the start of last season. Didn't he come through till January or February?
My opinion, Nicholson's probably more similar to yours in that beyond a goal against Hibs at the start of the season, I've not really seen a great deal of him that is overly impressive, other than the kind of sort of young inconsistent winger type thing. There's something there, but I just felt as though the overall impact that Cummins has had out of the candidates, and especially in a really, really testing situation last year where he came into a team that, I think more so than Hearts, had everything to lose, and was asked to lead the line in a team that couldn't score a goal to save their life. Fair play to him in the first leg of the playoff, turned up when it mattered, scored a couple of cracking goals. Always had his bad moment in the penalty shootout.
Aye, I was going to say that because it was
I'm sure you were going to say something.
No, it was a wee bit questionable when he posted on Twitter, I thought, the other day, when he said 2014 was a good year, 2015 will be a great year or something, and I thought, well, your team got relegated and you missed the penalty that they went down. I'm not sure most people would classify that as a good year. I mean, there's rolling with the punches, and then there's neglecting the feelings of the fans a wee bit.
Maybe he thought that 2013 that maybe he got planted at Hearts and he was playing at Hutchison Vale.
It was better than that, certainly.
Premier League footballer for a half a season, and he's established himself as a starter at Hibs. So he was my call. And
Okay.
I think he's probably scored our second highest goal scorer this season.
Okay, right, let's move on to the next one, and Ross and Sean, you will get your opinions on the next one.
Okay, the next one was best signing. Now, that was won by Mogara Gomez, and David Gray finished second in that category. Scott Allen finished third.
Ross, thoughts?
Well, I said Alexander for that one because I took it as best signing rather than best player. And overall, I think Alexander's one of the most important players in our team. Not only is he coming in as an elder to kind of coach the players, but also be that kind of person in the changing room that any youngster can go and speak to, any experience that they need, anything they need to ask him. Best player, I would have said Gomez, but best signing, Alexander.
Sean, a stick out for you in the respect of Gomez, or has someone been missed from that list?
No, I wouldn't necessarily single out Gomez. To be honest, apart from El Hasnoui, you couldn't say there was really a bad signing for Hearts this season. Certainly no at this point, I feel. David Gray is definitely a good one from the Hibs perspective, as is Scott Allen. I actually found it quite funny that it came second and third the way it did. I'm slightly surprised, especially considering how late he came in, that Malonga's not on the list, considering the goals he's racked up and how important he's actually been for
There seems to still be a bit of a love-hate thing going on though with the Hibs fans. They sometimes lament I think he actually works very hard in games, but he just sometimes doesn't come across that way to some fans.
He carries himself.
Yeah.
But
I also think
it's more laid back than
there
the
is
fact
a
that it
slight
lacks.
thing as well that style does sometimes slow games down when Hibs want the tempo raised. I thought we saw that a couple of times on Saturday actually. The one thing I'm going to say on this subject is that I agree that in terms of individual signings, Scott Allen and David Gray, and they've added to a Hibs side that was really lacking threat, potentially have more of a claim to this award. But the one area that I'm pleased that Gomez has been recognised is that spearheaded the quote-unquote revival that I know Hibs fans will be cringing at the thought of, but the idea that he came in as a credible name, a guy who had been playing in the SPL last season, coming in to kind of to spearhead it, to say I'm an experienced guy, I'm going to sit in the middle of the park and I'm going to hold this thing together. And it did add credibility to that new Hearts that I'm not going to say he's a world beater, a big name or anything like that, but he is a guy who's been around, knows Levine well, and it showed that there are contacts that will play for Hearts here that can bring in established, proven SPL players.
Yeah, he fully legitimised the signings going forward because, as you say, he had that pedigree that he had already sustained at a Premier League level, so him dropping down, you clearly saw the vision going forward, and I think that helped the fans buy into it and a lot of the players.
Okay, next award, Scott.
The next one was for Flop of the Year. Now, there's one outright winner. I do feel sorry for second and third because I don't really agree with them.
Is that like longest in the showers?
It was obviously Terry Butcher and Maurice Malpass winning that award. I don't think we have to go into too many reasons as to why that was. Yes, exactly.
Who was the goalkeeping coach? He always gets off lightly when they say it. Apparently he was a disaster.
Steve Marcella.
Aye, that guy.
Well, he was seemingly the scout as well.
Chief scout as well.
Yeah.
You see what he brought in?
Second and third went to Paul McCallum and El Hashnui, which I think is a little bit harsh on both counts. I think Paul McCallum was just hung out to dry, he wasn't fit, and locking that pushed the desperation button. El Hashnui as well, I think we're still to see the best of him in a number 10 role.
McCallum was always going to carry a weight when he's your only signing of a transfer window, and that hangs him out to dry.
And,
but you would
and
think
when it comes to a Premier League team, you expect a wee bit better.
You think there would be a specific focus on making sure that he was the right signing, though, and that. But like you say, it's maybe a failing on his part, maybe other people to blame for that. But I think we're unanimous that Terry Butcher has it.
Yeah, I said Hamill, but just for the way he acted.
Technically, you could say Derek Adams for Flop of the Year.
Oh no, we'll get there.
I think it was relatively justified in the way he went down, to be honest.
On to the next award.
Yeah, the next one was Radio or TV Pundit, and that was won by, it was another landslide, it was won by Mikey Stewart. And
was it biased?
But I was not rigging the count at all, just because he bought me a cup of tea.
A pot of tea?
Yeah, sorry, a pot of tea. Second and third went to Pat Nevin and Stephen Thompson, which I would probably agree with, to be fair.
It's a very lean.
I don't like Stephen
bunch
Thompson.
to pick from.
One bit.
Well, that's another discussion for another time that we're going to have about current players appearing as pundits when they're supposed to appear unbiased. I'm a wee bit confused by that whole scenario, but we'll talk about that in more detail at some point in the future.
I'm just happy Callum Davidson didn't get a vote.
On to the next award.
Okay, next one was Best Match, and that was just narrowly pipped by Hearts, the 2-1 win at Ibrox, just over the Hibs 4-0 thrashing of Rangers just a couple of weeks ago, and third spot went to the Hibs 3-0 very entertaining score draw with Dundee United in the Cup.
I think that's probably the only one that we can say has been influenced by a majority of Hearts supporters.
Yes, I think that's probably fair.
Because I have to say, I wouldn't have said that was Hearts' best game of the year.
It was probably for Hearts fans. It was a
marker.
In the sand. It was a real sort of putting your marker down, going, you know what? No matter what kind of squad we've put together here, you haven't heard the X, Y, and Z players. We're going to go out and sort of state what we are going to be about this season.
I think for a neutral standpoint as well, that was one that, especially knowing what it was like going into the start of the season, that was enthralling to watch it. If you were a neutral, it was absolutely horrendous supporting one of the teams because it was nerve-wrenching,
nail-biting stuff.
Yeah, aye.
Okay.
And the final category, just for a little bit of fun, was the funniest moment of the year. Now, that was won by the very premature Hibs relegation party. Turned out to be a little bit ironic given their final status. And second spot went to the Derek Adams bump. And the third spot actually went to the guy who fell over the gate at the recent cup game against Celtic at Tynecastle. That was quite funny.
Who tried to attack a Celtic player.
Oh yeah, aye, definitely.
Okay, they all seem fair to me. I mean, we're not going to go in detail on the relegation party because...
I'm going to chuck in a new entry to that. It's the Hibs fans at the game, they are bringing along the wrong flag.
Well, that's a candidate for next year's, I believe it's the difference between Congo and Democratic Republic of Congo. They're two different countries with two different flags, and unfortunately in a 50-50 the guy picked the wrong flag. The other one I have to say that counts from the derby towards next year's awards... No, it's not. That someone's checked. Oh, that guy.
Aye.
Maybe. I suppose you're right.
Passionate about being from the other Congo.
That seems tenuous. Like,
I can imagine what Malonga was looking at.
I hate you.
The other thing that happened at the game of the weekend that will count towards next year's or the end of the season one is the guy who is now a Twitter sensation who lost his pie in the celebration for Walker's goal, and it turned up in the hood of the woman sitting in front of him 20 minutes later.
Can we also throw out Callum Patterson in the stand with his now signature look that appears everywhere?
Oh, the young Rolf look, is that the one you're referring to?
Let's steer away from that one again.
No, you're allowed to acknowledge that the person exists. You're just not allowed to make comparisons between their personalities or characters, which we have not done. Callum and Callum's lawyer, we have not done that at all. We've just suggested that there is maybe a passing resemblance there.
He's got rid of the hairband.
When you've got your wee goatee and your glasses on.
Which he's got rid of.
Yes, thankfully.
I was having a close inspection the other day.
Hopefully not too close. Right, okay, let's wrap up the show, guys. We'll do very, very quick predictions for the weekend. Quick score for Hearts versus Dumbarton, Scott.
2 or 3-0 Hearts.
Ross.
2-0 Hearts.
Sean.
3-0 Hearts.
Mikey.
Don't care.
Fair enough.
Hearts win.
Hibs game, Mikey.
I think that we will win 2-0.
Okay, I'm not going to ask the other guys because it's only
Don't care either.
Exactly. Okay, thank you for joining us again on Monday Night Football. We got wrapped up a wee bit quicker than normal, but no quite as tight as we had wanted. But that's absolutely fine. We had fun, and we hope that you enjoyed listening. Also, join us next week. We believe we will have a guest.
We will have an ex-Hibs player on, but I will confirm that during the week.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you very much for joining us. We will speak to you again next week.